The last thing my father said to me before the lawyers got involved was, "Don't be selfish, Madeline." He said it with the same confident sneer he used when I was a child. Assuming I would fold like I always did, he didn't know that inside my purse was a single sheet of paper from a safe deposit box that proved his clean. Respectable life was actually built on a 30-year-old lie. The rain in Briar Glen always felt heavier than rain anywhere else. It was a dense, clinging mist that settled into the wool of your coat and the marrow of your bones, turning the simple act of standing upright into a test of endurance. I stood by the graveside, my heels sinking slightly into the softened earth, and watched the mahogany casket lower into the ground. It was the final physical evidence of my grandmother, Margaret, the only person in my family who had ever looked at me and seen a person rather than a function. I was 33 years old. I had a career in logistics, a tidy apartment in the city 2 hours away, and a freshly signed divorce decree that felt like a scar that had not quite healed. Yet, standing there between my mother and my younger sister, Chloe, I felt exactly as I had when I was 12. I was the structural support beam. I was the one holding the umbrella at the correct angle so my mother's blowout did not frizz. I was the one who had coordinated with the funeral home, selected the hymns, and ordered the flower arrangements that were currently wilting under the gray sky. Chloe, 3 years my junior, was weeping. She cried with a theatrical, fragile beauty that made everyone around us want to rush forward and offer her a handkerchief. She was the protected one, the fragile bird, the one who felt things so deeply that the world had to be padded for her safety. I loved my sister, but I also knew the script by heart. She was the protagonist of every room she entered. I was the stage manager, invisible in black, making sure the props were in place. My father, Robert, stood on the other side of Chloe, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. He looked stoic, the picture of the grieving son, but I saw his eyes darting toward the parking lot, checking his watch. He hated inefficiency. Grief, to him, was an inefficiency. After the service, the crowd thinned out, drifting toward the cars like a tide receding. I stayed behind to thank the vicar. When I turned to leave, a hand caught my elbow. The grip was surprisingly strong, the fingers knobby and cold. It was Mrs. Gable, my grandmother's oldest friend. She was a tiny woman, shrunk by age and osteoporosis, but her eyes were sharp, undimmed by the cataracts clouding them. "Madeline," she said. Her voice was a dry rasp. "Hello, Mrs. Gable," I said, leaning down. It was a beautiful service. She ignored the pleasantry. She pulled me closer, stepping inside the perimeter of my personal space. The smell of mothballs and peppermint was overwhelming. "I want you to know something," she whispered. Her gaze darted over my shoulder to where my parents were waiting by their silver sedan. "Margaret talked about you. In those last few weeks, she worried about you." I nodded, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "I know. We were close." "No," Mrs. Gable said. She shook my arm. A sharp, frantic motion. "Not like that. She talked about the money. She talked about making sure you were taken care of. She was very specific. Madeline, she knew you were the one who had to start over. She wanted to make sure you had the ground under your feet." The words stuck in my chest like a splinter. I stiffened. My grandmother and I had never discussed money. We discussed books. We discussed her garden. We discussed the subtle art of enduring a Henderson family dinner without screaming. "I appreciate you telling me," I said, though a cold prickle of unease was starting to spread down my back. Mrs. Gable looked at me for a long second, then released my arm. "Watch yourself, dear," she said. I walked to my car, the unease settling into a heavy stone in my stomach. My parents were waiting. We were going to dinner. Just the immediate family, a celebration of life. My mother had called it. The restaurant was an upscale steakhouse on the edge of town, the kind of place with dark wood paneling and leather booths that swallowed you whole. It was the type of establishment my father preferred, because the waiters were deferential and the prices were high enough to keep out the riffraff. We were seated in a semi-private alcove, my mother, Ellen, ordered a bottle of red wine without asking anyone else. She was vibrating with a strange energy. Usually, after a funeral, she would be exhausted, performing the role of the bereaved daughter-in-law. Today, she seemed almost giddy. "To Mom," my father said, raising his glass. "To Grandma." Chloe echoed, her voice still thick with tears. "To Grandma," I said. We drank. The wine was heavy and oaky. For 10 minutes, we made safe, polite conversation. We talked about the flowers. We talked about who had shown up and who had sent cards. I played my part. I nodded. I agreed that the vicar had spoken well. I cut my steak into precise, bite-sized squares. Then, the tone shifted. My father set his fork down and looked at Chloe. He smiled, a genuine, wide expression that transformed his usually severe face. "Well," he said, "I think today marks a turning point. A sad one. Yes, but life goes on. And for you, Chloe, it is going to go on in a big way." Chloe beamed, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. "I am just so excited. Daddy, I really feel like this is it." I looked between them, confused. "What is it?" My mother turned to me, her eyes bright. "Oh, Madeline, we have not had a chance to tell you with everything going on. Chloe is finally opening her boutique." I paused, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. "I thought that was just an idea." "It was," Chloe said, sitting up straighter. "But now it is real. We found the perfect space on Main Street. The lease is signed, and I have ordered the inventory. High-end sustainable fabrics. It is going to be huge." I stared at her. Chloe had never held a job for longer than 6 months. She had degree credits but no diploma. She had passion projects that flared up and burned out like cheap fireworks. A boutique on Main Street would require tens of thousands of dollars just to open the doors. "That sounds expensive," I said. I kept my voice neutral. "You are always so practical." "Madeline," my mother sighed, waving her hand as if swatting away a fly. "It is an investment. We are investing in your sister's future. She needs a fresh start. A fresh start." I knew that phrase. It was code. It meant Chloe had maxed out another credit card, or angered a landlord, or needed bailing out of a situation she had created. And the capital, I asked. "Where is the capital coming from?" My father cleared his throat. He picked up his wine glass, swirling the dark liquid. "We are handling it. It is a family matter." I felt the splinter Mrs. Gable had planted in my chest twist. My divorce had left me financially bruised. I had lost the house. I was renting a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled of someone else's cooking. I was driving a car with a transmission that hesitated every time I merged onto the highway. I had never asked my parents for a dime. I had been proud of that. I looked at my father. "Dad," I asked, carefully, "Speaking of family matters, has the inheritance paperwork been handled?" The table went silent. The clatter of silverware on porcelain stopped. My mother smiled, but it was too quick. It was a reflex smile, the kind she used when a neighbor asked a question that was too personal. "Oh, Madeline," she said, "do not worry about that tonight. It is a funeral." "I know," I said, "but Mrs. Gable mentioned something to me. And with the funeral costs and everything else, I just want to know what the timeline is." My father's jaw tightened. I saw the muscle feather near his ear. It was the look he gave when I was a teenager and asked why I had a curfew while Chloe did not. It was the end of discussion face. "It is all settled," my mother said, her voice bright and brittle. "Settled how I asked." My father placed his hand flat on the table. "It is being handled by the firm, Wexler and Crane. You do not need to concern yourself with the logistics. Madeline, we are taking care of the estate. But there is a will," I pressed. "Grandma had a will." "Of course there is a will," my father snapped. His voice was not loud, but it carried a razor edge. "Everything is being distributed according to the needs of the family. Now, can we please finish our dinner in peace?" He looked at me with cold, hard eyes. The message was clear. "Stop." I looked at Chloe. She was studying her salad, avoiding my gaze. She knew. Whatever was happening, she knew, and she was letting them do it because it benefited her. I finished my dinner, I drank my wine, I paid my third of the bill because my father did not reach for the check when it came to my share. The following week was a blur of gray cubicles and fluorescent lights. I went back to work at the logistics firm, burying myself in shipping manifests and supply chain spreadsheets. It was comforting work. Numbers did not lie. If a container was missing, there was a reason. If a balance was off, you could trace it back to the error. I checked my email obsessively. I told myself I was being paranoid. My parents were difficult. Yes. They favored Chloe. Yes. But they were not thieves. My father was a respected businessman in the community. He had served on the library board. He was a deacon at the church. He cared about reputation more than anything. He would not do something illegal. 7 days after the funeral, the email arrived. It appeared in my inbox at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. The subject line was generic, Notice of Beneficiary Distribution Completion. The sender was an automated system from Wexler Crane Fiduciary Services. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked it open. Dear Beneficiary, this email is to notify you that all scheduled distributions regarding the estate of Margaret E. Henderson have been finalized and completed as of this date. If you have received a direct deposit, please allow 48 hours for funds to clear. Sincerely, Wexler Crane Fiduciary Services. I stared at the screen. I opened my banking app on my phone. I refreshed the page. Balance, $4,212. There was no pending deposit. There was no notification. I reread the email. It was a blast notification. It went to everyone listed in the system. I picked up the phone. My hands were trembling slightly. I dialed the number listed in the email signature. Wexler and Crane. A woman's voice answered. Smooth, professional, bored. Hello, I said. My name is Madeline Henderson. I received an email about the Margaret Henderson estate. One moment, the woman said. I heard the click of keys. I do not see a file open for a Madeline Henderson as a primary client. She said, Do you have a document ID number? No. I said, I am her granddaughter. I just got the email saying distributions were complete. I haven't received anything. I cannot discuss the details of a trust or estate without the document ID. The receptionist said. Her tone was rehearsed. I don't have an ID. I said, my voice rising slightly. I am a beneficiary. My grandmother was Margaret Henderson. My parents are Robert and Ellen Henderson. There was a pause. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. When the receptionist spoke again, her voice had changed. It was no longer bored. It was guarded, polite, but firm, like a security guard stopping you at the gate. Ms. Henderson, she said, I see the file here. The distributions have been made to the primary beneficiaries as instructed by the executors. If you have questions regarding the allocation, you will need to speak with the executors directly. We are not authorized to release further information to you. The executors, I said, that would be my parents. I cannot confirm or deny that. She said, have a good day. Ms. Henderson, the line went dead. I sat in my office chair, the phone still pressed to my ear. The silence of the disconnected line roared like the ocean. They had done it. They had actually done it. I left work early. I did not ask for permission. I just walked out to my car and drove. The drive to Briar Glen took 2 hours. But I did not remember any of it. I did not remember the highway, the tolls, or the traffic. I only remembered the heat rising in my face, the feeling of betrayal burning through my skin like a fever. I pulled into my parents' driveway at 6 o'clock. Their house was perfect. The lawn was manicured to a uniform green. The shutters were painted a tasteful slate gray. It was a house that screamed stability. I used my key to open the front door. I did not knock. They were in the living room. The television was on, playing the local news. My father was in his armchair, reading a tablet. My mother was on the sofa, flipping through a catalog. Madeline, my mother said, looking up, startled. We were not expecting you. Is everything all right? I stood in the entryway. I was wearing my work clothes, a sensible navy blazer and slacks. I felt small. I felt like a child who had broken a vase, but I also felt a cold, hard anger solidifying in my gut. I called the law firm. I said, My father looked up from his tablet. He took off his reading glasses and set them on the side table. He did not look surprised. He looked annoyed. I told you, Madeline, he said. We handled it. They said the distributions are complete. I said. They said I am not on the list. My mother closed her catalog. She stood up and walked toward me. Her hands clasped together. Madeline, honey, you have to understand. It was a complicated situation. Grandma's finances were fluid. Stop. I said, Mrs. Gable told me. She told me Grandma was specific. She wanted me taken care of. My father stood up. He was a tall man, and he used his height as a weapon. He walked over to where my mother stood, creating a united front. Mrs. Gable is a senile old woman who does not know the first thing about our family finances. He said, the money was family money. Madeline, it belongs to the family, and as the heads of this family, your mother and I had to make a decision about how to reallocate it fairly. Fairly, I choked out a laugh. It was a sharp, ugly sound. You gave it to Chloe. You are using it to pay for her boutique. Chloe needs it, my mother cried out, her voice shrill. She is trying to build a life. Madeline. She does not have the career you have. She does not have the stability you have. You have a good job. You have your own apartment. You are independent. Chloe needs help getting established. I lost my house. I said. My voice was trembling. I went through a divorce 6 months ago. I am driving a car that breaks down if it rains too hard. I am 33 years old and I have zero savings because I spent it all trying to save a marriage that was dead on arrival. And you think I am doing fine. You are surviving, my father said. His voice was cold. Chloe was drowning. We made a choice. We put the resources where they were needed most. It is what your grandmother would have wanted. She would have wanted the family to be whole. She wanted me to have it, I shouted. It was the first time I had raised my voice to my father in 20 years. Don't be selfish. Madeline, he snapped. The words hung in the air. Don't be selfish. It was the mantra of my childhood. Madeline, let Chloe have the last cookie. Don't be selfish. Madeline, give Chloe your doll. She's crying. Don't be selfish. Madeline, cancel your plans and drive your sister to the concert. Don't be selfish. You are doing fine. My father continued, his tone settling back into that maddening, reasonable register. You are the strong one. You always have been. Do not let greed ruin your relationship with your sister. I looked at him. I looked at my mother, who was nodding in agreement, her face a mask of pleading disappointment. They truly believed it. That was the horror of it. They had rewritten reality so thoroughly that in their version of the story, I was the villain. I was the greedy, grasping daughter trying to take food out of her baby sister's mouth. I backed away. I reached for the doorknob. I am not the one who is ruining things, I whispered. I opened the door and walked out. Madeline, my mother called after me. Madeline, come back here. We can discuss this like adults. I got into my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. I locked the doors. I sat there for a long time, staring at the perfectly trimmed hedges of my childhood home. I realized then that I was not just hurt. I was being erased. My needs, my pain, my future, none of it mattered to them. I was a utility. I was an appliance that was expected to work without maintenance, and when I finally asked for something, I was broken. I drove home in silence. The apartment was dark when I arrived. I did not turn on the lights. I walked into the bedroom and sat on the floor next to my closet. In the back of the closet, on the top shelf, was a cardboard box. It was an old shoebox, taped shut. It contained the letters my grandmother had written to me when I was away at college. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to know that I had not imagined the love she had for me. I needed to know that I wasn't the selfish monster my parents saw. I pulled the box down and sat cross-legged on the carpet. I used my fingernail to slit the tape. The smell of lavender drifted out. It was her scent. I sifted through the letters, birthday cards, postcards from her trips to Florida. notes written on stationery with bluebirds on the letterhead, and then, at the very bottom, I found it. It was a white envelope. It was sealed. On the front, in my grandmother's shaky cursive script, it read, "For Madeline if they try to pressure you." My breath hitched. I held the envelope for a moment, afraid to open it. It felt heavy. I tore the flap open. Inside, there were two things. The first was a note, written on a piece of yellow legal pad paper. The handwriting was erratic, the letters digging deep into the paper, as if she had written it in a hurry or in anger. "My dearest Madeline, if you are reading this, then my fears were correct. I am sorry I didn't stop this sooner. I am sorry I was too tired to fight them in the open. But I know you. You are strong, but you are also kind, and they will use your kindness against you. Do not let them. Trust paper over promises. Love. Grandma." The second item was a small, plastic card. It was blue. It was a key card. On the front, embossed in silver letters, it said Juniper Ridge Credit Union. On the back, written in black permanent marker on the signature strip, was a number box 404. I stared at the card. Juniper Ridge was a small bank in the next county over. It wasn't the bank my parents used. It wasn't the bank my grandmother used for her daily checking. It was a secret. I gripped the card in my hand. The plastic edge bit into my palm. My father had called me selfish. He had told me I was doing fine. He had told me to swallow the betrayal and be grateful for the scraps. I looked at the note again. Trust paper over promises. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. The tears that had been threatening to fall all evening finally dried up. I wasn't sad anymore. I was awake. They wanted to fight. They wanted to talk about family matters. I put the card into my wallet. Sliding it into the slot behind my driver's license, I would give them a family matter. The drive to Juniper Ridge Credit Union took me 40 minutes. Winding through back roads that bordered the edge of the county, it was a route I had never taken, leading to a town I rarely visited. That was the point. I realized my grandmother had chosen this bank precisely because it was inconvenient. It was outside the orbit of my father's daily routine, far from the country club and the golf course, hidden away in a strip of strip malls and feed stores that felt stuck in the late 90s. The bank itself was a brick building with a faded blue awning. The interior smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. When I presented the key card and my driver's license to the clerk, a heavy-set woman named Beatrice, she didn't just glance at it. She stopped typing and looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "Margaret Henderson," she said. She was a lovely woman, sharp as a tack. "She was," I said. I tried to keep my voice steady. "She came in here alone." "Usually," Beatrice said, typing something into her terminal. "Always insisted on going into the vault by herself. Said she liked the quiet." She handed me a clipboard to sign. My hand wavered as I wrote my name. I felt like an intruder, or worse, a grave robber. The conditioning ran deep. "Don't be selfish. Madeline, don't pry." But the weight of the key card in my pocket was a physical reminder of the permission I had been given. Beatrice led me to the vault. It was a heavy steel door that looked like it belonged in a movie from the 50s. Inside, the walls were lined with metal drawers. She pointed to number 404. "Take your time," she said, and left me alone in the small, windowless room. I unlocked the box. It slid out with a metallic rasp. I carried it to the small viewing table and sat down. My heart was thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I lifted the lid. Inside, there were no jewels. There were no stacks of cash. It was just paper. Stacks and stacks of paper, organized with binder clips and sticky notes. I started with the thickest bundle. It was a photocopy of a document titled Last Will and Testament of Margaret E. Henderson, dated 4 years ago. I skimmed the legal jargon until I found the distribution clause. It was clear, concise, and undeniable. To my granddaughter, Madeline Rose Henderson, I bequeath the sum of $75,000, intended for her sole use and security. $75,000. It wasn't a fortune to some. Maybe, but to me, Staring at a rental deposit and a car repair bill, it was a lifeline. It was freedom. It was the ability to breathe without calculating the cost of the oxygen. Beneath the will was a ledger. It was a simple black notebook, the kind you buy at a drugstore for $2. I opened it. My grandmother's handwriting filled the pages, columns of dates, names, and amounts. As I read, the air in the vault seemed to grow thin. It wasn't just a record of her spending. It was a record of the family's truth. June 12, 2018. Loan to Robert for cash flow issue. $5,000. August 3, 2018. Madeline paid for groceries. Repaid Madeline in full. September 10, 2018. Chloe rent assistance. $2,000. Not repaid. December 1, 2018. Robert. Holiday expenses. $3,000. Not repaid. I flipped through the pages. The pattern was relentless. For over a decade, my grandmother had tracked every dollar, and the story the numbers told was devastating. There were dozens of entries for me. Madeline covered pharmacy copay. Madeline bought heater. Every single one was marked repaid, or Madeline refused payment. Then there were the entries for my sister. Chloe car repair. Chloe credit card bailout. Chloe trip to Cabo. Robert asked to cover, beside every single one of these entries, my grandmother had written a single word in red ink, gift, but it was the entries for my parents that made my stomach turn. They were frequent, and they were large. Robert business bridge loan. Ellen country club dues. Robert tax adjustment. The totals were staggering. Over 10 years. They had drained nearly $40,000 from her, piece by piece, always under the guise of temporary help. I reached the bottom of the box. There was a small bundle of receipts clipped together. On top was a photocopy of a cashier's check, dated 6 months ago. The amount was $12,000. The payee was a company I had never heard of, Harbor Slate Recovery. My grandmother had highlighted the name in bright yellow. Beside it, she had written a question mark. I took a picture of the check with my phone. I took pictures of the will. I took pictures of the ledger pages that made my hands shake the most. Then, at the very bottom of the box, I found a slip of paper with a string of numbers and letters. It was labeled Wexler and Crane, document YD. I sat back in the chair. I felt sick. This wasn't just about my sister getting a boutique. This was about a decade of bleeding an old woman dry, and then stealing her final gift to cover the evidence. I packed everything back into the box. I needed to be smart. I couldn't just storm into my parents' house screaming. They would deny it. They would gaslight me. They would say the ledger was the ramblings of a confused old woman. I needed verification. I walked out of the bank, the sunlight blinding me after the dim light of the vault. I sat in my car and dialed Wexler and Crane again. Wexler and Crane. The same bored voice answered. "Hello," I said. "This is Madeline Henderson. I am calling regarding the estate of Margaret Henderson. I have a document ID." The pause on the other end was palpable. "Go ahead," the receptionist said. I read the string of numbers from the slip of paper. There was a moment of silence, followed by the sound of rapid typing. When the receptionist spoke again, the boredom was gone. It was replaced by a sharp, professional alertness. "Thank you. Ms. Henderson. I have the file open. I see here that you are listed as a secondary beneficiary in the original draft, but the assets were moved to the primary trust vehicle." "Primary trust vehicle," I asked. "What does that mean?" "The assets were consolidated into the Henderson Family Revocable Trust," she said. "The trustees are Robert and Ellen Henderson. The distribution you are inquiring about was transferred to that trust account on the 15th of last month." My stomach dropped. They hadn't just spent the money, they had laundered it. They had moved it into a container they controlled, likely arguing that they were managing it for the benefit of the family. And was there a specific designation for the $75,000, I asked? The notes here say. The receptionist hesitated. She seemed to be reading something she wasn't sure she should share. The notes indicate a reallocation due to beneficiary hardship and consolidation of family assets. Beneficiary hardship. I repeated, that would be me. I cannot interpret the notes. Ms. Henderson. she said. I can only tell you that the funds were distributed to the trust. If you have issues with the trust management, you need to speak with the trustees. I hung up. Beneficiary hardship. They had argued that I was in hardship, or perhaps that Chloe was, and used that as the legal excuse to seize the money. I drove home, my mind racing. I needed advice. I called Sarah. Sarah had been my best friend since college. She was a no-nonsense project manager who had held my hand through my divorce and had never once told me to be nice when my ex-husband tried to keep the dog. You need a lawyer. Madeline, Sarah said. The moment I finished explaining the ledger, I can't sue my parents. Sarah, I said, I was pacing my small living room. It's gross. It's petty. People will think I'm just greedy. Let them think it. Sarah snapped. Madeline, listen to me. They stole from you. They stole from your grandmother. This isn't about you wanting a new purse. This is about them taking what she wanted you to have. But maybe they really are just trying to help Chloe. I said. The old guilt was creeping in. Maybe they think I'm fine. I am fine. Technically, I have a job. You are eating ramen noodles 3 nights a week, Sarah said. And you are driving a death trap. Stop it. Stop doing their work for them. What do you mean? They trained you to feel this way, she said. They trained you to feel ashamed for wanting what is yours. That is how they get away with it. If you don't fight back, you are agreeing with them. You are agreeing that you don't matter. Her words hit me hard. You are agreeing that you don't matter. I took a deep breath. You're right. I know I'm right, Sarah said. Now, don't use anyone in town. Your dad knows everyone in Briar Glen. Go to Lake Haven. Find someone mean. I didn't want someone mean. I wanted someone who could tell me if I was crazy. I spent the night researching. I found a firm in Lake Haven, a city 40 minutes north, Dalton Reyes, LLP. Their website was understated, no flashing banners, no promises of millions in settlements, just a list of practice areas, estate litigation, fiduciary duty, fraud. I made an appointment for 2 days later. The office of Dalton Reyes was on the 3rd floor of a brick building overlooking the lake. The attorney, Elias Dalton, was a man in his 50s with graying hair and a calm, deliberate manner. He wore a cardigan rather than a suit jacket. He didn't look like a shark. He looked like a professor. I laid it all out. The conversation with Mrs. Gable, the email, the don't be selfish speech, the safe deposit box, the ledger. I handed him the photocopy of the cashier's check to Harbor Slate Recovery. Mr. Dalton put on his reading glasses. He studied the check for a long moment. Then he looked up at me. You said your grandmother highlighted this, he asked. Yes, I said. She put a question mark next to it. He tapped the paper with his finger. Do you know what Harbor Slate Recovery is? No. I said. I assumed it was a medical bill. Or maybe physical therapy. Mr. Dalton shook his head slowly. It is a debt acquisition firm. They buy bad debt. Usually credit card debt. Sometimes personal loans that have gone into default. They are aggressive. They don't usually deal with amounts this small unless they are collecting on a larger sum that has been broken down. I stared at him. Debt Ms. Henderson, he said, leaning back. This check suggests that someone in your family was being pursued by creditors, someone who needed $12,000 in a hurry to make a problem go away. My parents. I asked. But they are wealthy. They have the house, the cars, the club membership. Mr. Dalton gave me a sad, knowing smile. Appearance is not solvency. In my experience, the people who fight the hardest over inheritance are often the ones who are drowning silently. He opened a folder and started taking notes. Here is the situation. You have a strong case for an accounting, as a beneficiary named in a prior will, and as a presumptive beneficiary of the family trust. You have a right to know how the assets were moved. So we sue them, I asked, my voice small. Not yet, he said. We start quietly. We send a formal demand for an accounting. We ask for the trust documents. We ask for the transfer records. We see how they react. If they have nothing to hide, they will be annoyed, but they will comply. And if they have something to hide, then they will get angry, he said, and they will make mistakes. He looked at the check again. But this is interesting. I want you to look into this. If your parents were paying off a debt collection agency using your grandmother's money, that is not just unfair. That is potentially a breach of fiduciary duty. It is theft. I left the office with a retainer agreement signed and a specific mission: reconstruct the timeline. I spent the weekend on my living room floor, surrounded by papers. I didn't have my parents' bank statements, but I had the next best thing: my grandmother's ledger and my own email history. I searched my inbox for keywords: emergency, help, loan, dad, mom. I found an email from my father dated 3 years ago. Subject: urgent favor. Madeline, we are a little short this month due to some liquidity timing with the business. Can you cover the property tax bill? I will pay you back next month. Amount $4,000. I checked the ledger. 2 days after that email, my grandmother's ledger showed a withdrawal, Robert tax help. $4,000. Gift. He had asked me. I had said I couldn't do it because I was saving for a house. So he had gone to her. I found another one. Subject: Chloe's car. Madeline, your sister needs new brakes. It is dangerous for her to drive. Can you help her out? I checked the ledger. Chloe car repair. $800. Gift. The picture that formed was not of a wealthy couple helping a struggling daughter. It was a picture of a leaky boat. My parents were constantly shifting money, robbing Peter to pay Paul, using my grandmother as the ultimate overdraft protection. And now that she was gone, they had seized her estate to plug the holes. But I needed to know about the $75,000, and I needed to know if Chloe was a victim in this or a participant. I texted Chloe, "Hey, can we grab coffee?" "Just us. I want to clear the air." She replied 3 hours later, "Sure." Tuesday, we met at a coffee shop halfway between Briar Glen and my city. Chloe arrived 10 minutes late. She was wearing a new coat, a beautiful camel hair trench that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked nervous. Her eyes darted around the shop before she sat down. "Hi," she said, breathless. "Hi," I said. I didn't smile. "Look, Madeline," she started, unwinding her scarf. "I know you are upset about the funeral dinner. Daddy can be intense, but you have to understand. This boutique is my dream." I took a sip of my black coffee. "I know it is. Chloe, I am not trying to take your dream away." "Then why are you calling the lawyers?" she asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Mom said you called the law firm. She said you are trying to cause trouble." "I am not trying to cause trouble," I said calmly. "I am trying to understand. Grandma left something for me. I know she did." Chloe looked down at her latte. She picked at the foam with a wooden stirrer. "She didn't leave you anything." "Madeline, not really. Mom said she was confused at the end. She said Grandma promised everyone everything. She wasn't confused." I said, "I have her letters." Chloe's head snapped up. "What letters?" "Letters she wrote me. Before she died." Fear flashed in Chloe's eyes. It was quick, but it was there. "Well, whatever she wrote." "It doesn't matter," Chloe said, her voice hardening. "The money is in the family trust, and Mom and Dad decided to invest it in the business. It is a loan. Madeline, I'm going to pay it back. A loan," I repeated, "just like the car repairs, just like the trip to Cabo." Chloe flushed pink. Those were different. I was young. You are 30 years old. Chloe. She slammed her hand on the table. "Why are you being so mean? You always do this. You act like you are so perfect. Just because you have a boring job and a 401k. You don't understand what it is like to be creative, to have a vision." I leaned forward. "I don't care about your vision. Chloe, I care about the fact that Mom and Dad took $75,000 that was meant for me and gave it to you." I didn't think. I just threw the number out. Chloe didn't blink. She didn't look confused. "It wasn't 75. She snapped. "It was closer to 72 after taxes. And anyway, half of that went to Dad's thing. So don't act like I got it all." The silence that followed was absolute. The noise of the coffee shop, the grinder, the chatter. The music faded into a dull roar. I stared at her. I had never told her the number. I had never told anyone the number except my lawyer. "You knew," I whispered. Chloe's eyes went wide. She realized what she had done. She brought her hand up to her mouth, covering her lips. Mom told me. She stammered. Mom mentioned it. You just said Grandma didn't leave me anything. I said, you said she was confused, but you knew exactly how much it was. You knew it was $75,000. Madeline, please. And you said half went to Dad's thing. I continued, my voice shaking with cold rage. What thing did Dad need $30-something thousand for? Chloe stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. I have to go, she said. You are twisting my words. Sit down. Chloe, I am leaving. She grabbed her purse. You are just jealous. You have always been jealous. Mom was right. You are trying to ruin everything because you are miserable alone. She turned and stormed out of the shop, her expensive coat billowing behind her. I sat there for a long time. My coffee had gone cold. I had come here hoping my sister was a pawn. I had hoped she was just a spoiled child who didn't understand where the money came from, but she knew. She knew the amount. She knew it was mine, and she had justified taking it because she felt she deserved it more. Half of that went to Dad's thing. That was the key. I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Dalton. I have a confirmation. I said. My voice was steady. It was the steadiness of someone who has nothing left to lose. Good. Mr. Dalton said. What did you find? My sister knows the amount. I said, and she admitted that half of it didn't go to her. She said it went to Dad's thing. Dad's thing. Mr. Dalton mused. That sounds like our Harbor Slate recovery friend. I think so too. I said, Mr. Dalton, I want to send the letter. I want to demand the accounting. Are you sure? He asked. Once we send this, the bridge is burned. I looked out the window at the parking lot where my sister's car had just peeled away. The bridge was burned a long time ago. I said, they just didn't tell me until now. Send it. The formal demand letter went out on a Thursday morning. It was a dry, unfeeling thing. 3 pages of heavy bond paper that reduced my entire relationship with my family to a series of statutory citations and requests for comprehensive accounting. Mr. Dalton had drafted it with the precision of a surgeon, slicing through the emotional fog my parents relied on to obscure the truth. We were not asking for their love. We were asking for the ledger. The response did not come from their lawyer. It came from my mother. At 11 o'clock on a Friday night, I was sitting in my kitchen, nursing a mug of herbal tea and staring at the rain streaking the window. When my phone buzzed, it was an email. The subject line was simply, family. I hesitated before opening it. My thumb hovered over the glass, trembling slightly. This was the conditioning kicking in again, the trained response to fear their disapproval. I took a breath, reminded myself of the empty bank account and the lies, and tapped the screen. Madeline, I am writing this with tears in my eyes. I cannot believe you would hire a stranger to attack your own flesh and blood. After everything we have done for you, after we supported you through the divorce, after we welcomed you home when you had nowhere else to go. Your father is heartbroken. He is trying to protect this family, just as he always has. We made decisions based on what was best for everyone, including you, even if you are too blinded by jealousy to see it. We are not hiding anything. We are managing a complex estate during a time of grief. I pray you find it in your heart to stop this madness before you destroy the only bridges you have left. Grandma would be ashamed of you. I read the last line 3 times. Grandma would be ashamed of you. It was a heat-seeking missile designed to hit the softest part of my conscience. For a moment, it worked. The guilt washed over me, hot and suffocating. Maybe I was being petty. Maybe I was the villain they painted me to be. Then I looked at the coffee table where the photocopy of the cashier's check to Harbor Slate Recovery sat. Grandma didn't highlight that check because she was proud of them. She highlighted it because she was scared. I did not reply to the email. I forwarded it to Mr. Dalton with a short note. Received this. Proceeding as planned. 2 days later, the documents arrived. They came in a courier envelope from Wexler Crane, accompanied by a cover letter that radiated professional annoyance. They had provided the trust summary and the beneficiary designation form, but notably, they had not provided the full transaction history we had requested. I took the papers to a coffee shop near my office, needing the background noise of strangers to keep me grounded. I ordered a large black coffee and spread the documents out on the small round table. The trust summary was dense with legalese, but I had spent the last week educating myself on the terminology. I scanned the clauses, looking for my name. I found it on page 4, under Section 7 Contingent Distributions. Beneficiary Madeline Rose Henderson shall receive support at the discretion of the trustees, subject to the conditional support clause herein defined. I frowned. Conditional support. I flipped to the definitions section. Conditional support funds designated for beneficiaries who have demonstrated a history of financial instability, poor judgment, or vulnerability to external influence. Trustees retain sole authority to withhold or disperse funds to ensure said funds are not squandered or used to enable destructive behaviors. I felt the blood drain from my face. The shop around me, the hiss of the espresso machine. The chatter of students faded into a dull buzz. They hadn't just taken the money. They had codified a lie into a legal document to justify taking it. Financial instability, poor judgment, destructive behaviors. It read as if I were a gambling addict, as if I were on drugs, as if I were someone who couldn't be trusted with $5, let alone $75,000. I was a logistics manager. I had a credit score of 780. I had never missed a bill payment in my life until my divorce drained my savings. My hands shook as I took a picture of the paragraph and sent it to Sarah. "Look at this," I typed. "They put this in the trust." Sarah's reply came instantly. "That is character assassination. That is evil." I couldn't wait for Mr. Dalton. I needed to hear my father say it. I needed to hear him explain why he had signed a document that labeled his responsible. Boring, dutiful daughter as a financial risk. I called him. He answered on the second ring. His voice was clipped, businesslike. "Robert Henderson." "It's me," I said. There was a pause. Then a heavy sigh. "Madeline, I assume you are calling to apologize for that letter your lawyer sent. I am calling about the trust summary." I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and adrenaline. "I am reading the clause about conditional support." "What about it?" he asked. He sounded bored. "It says I have a history of financial instability." I said, "It says I have poor judgment. It says I can't be trusted with money. It is just legal wording." "Madeline," he said, dismissing it as if I were complaining about the font size. "It is a standard template Wexler and Crane uses to protect the assets. It is not a template." "Dad," I snapped, "it is a lie. You know it is a lie. I have never been unstable. I have never been destructive. Why would you sign something that says that about me?" He was silent for a moment. I could hear the faint rustle of papers in the background. "We had to protect the estate," he said finally. His voice had dropped an octave, becoming harder. "You were going through a divorce, Madeline. You were emotional. You were vulnerable. We couldn't risk the family capital being dragged into your settlement or misused." "Misused?" I asked. "Like using it to pay off a debt collection agency?" The line went dead silent. I held my breath. I hadn't meant to play that card yet, but the anger had pushed it out of me. "I don't know what you are talking about," he said. His voice was ice cold. "And frankly, Madeline, if you are going to be this combative, you can talk to the lawyers. Do not call this house again until you are ready to act like a daughter." He hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone. He hadn't asked what I meant. He hadn't asked. "What debt agency?" He had just shut down. That was a confirmation in itself. I needed to go deeper. I needed to understand how they had gotten Grandma to agree to this. Margaret Henderson was sharp. She was proud. She would never have signed a document calling me unstable, unless she was coerced or unless she didn't know she was signing it. I went back to my apartment and went straight to the closet. I pulled down the shoebox again. I had read the letters, but I hadn't gone through the digital archives. My grandmother wasn't great with technology, but she had a cell phone. When she passed, my mother had given it to me, saying she didn't want the clutter. I had kept it in the box. Uncharged, I plugged it in. It took 10 minutes to come to life. I went to the voicemail. There were 30 messages saved. Most were from me or Chloe. Hi, Grandma. Just checking in. Hi, Grandma. Happy birthday. But there was one from 2 months before she died. It was a voice memo, not a voicemail. She must have hit the record button by accident, or perhaps on purpose. I pressed play. The audio was scratchy. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit in her room at Willowgate. Tired. Robert. I am so tired. That was Grandma's voice. It sounded thin. Reedy. I know. Mom. My father's voice. It was loud, projecting the fake cheerfulness people use with the elderly. But we just need to get this signature updated. The old one isn't compliant with the new tax laws. It's for the girls. You want the girls to be safe, don't you? I already signed. Grandma said. I signed the papers for Madeline. Those were the old papers. Mom. My mother's voice chimed in. She sounded stressed, tight. Those papers are going to get tied up in probate for years. The government will take half. This new trust keeps it safe. It keeps it in the family. Just sign here. Mom, then you can sleep. I don't understand all these words. Grandma whispered. Conditional. What is this? It's just legal jargon. Mom. My father said. His voice was impatient now. Don't worry about the fine print. Trust me. Do you trust me? There was a long silence on the recording. I just want to sleep, Grandma said. Then sign. My father said, sign, and we will leave. The recording ended. I sat in the dark, tears streaming down my face. They hadn't just manipulated her. They had bullied her. They had cornered a dying woman in her room, confused her with lies about tax laws and government seizure, and preyed on her exhaustion to get what they wanted. I saved the file. I emailed it to myself. I emailed it to Mr. Dalton. The next morning, I was in Dalton's office. I played the recording for him. He listened with his eyes closed, his fingers steeped together. When it finished, he opened his eyes. They were hard, undue influence. He said softly, textbook, but we need more. We need to prove that the document she signed that day is the same one they are presenting now. He pulled out the trust summary. Look at the date of execution. November 12th. I looked. November 12th. That was 3 weeks before she died. I am going to request the full notary log, Dalton said. Every notarized document has to be recorded in a logbook. We need to see who notarized this, where they were, and who else was in the room. It took 3 days to get the records. The law firm, Wexler Crane, provided a copy of the signature page. The notary stamp belonged to a woman named Janice Miller. The location of notarization was listed as Cedar Brook Financial Center, 1200 Oak Street, Briar Glen. I looked at the date again. November 12th. Wait, I said, pointing at the paper. November 12th. That was a Tuesday. Yes, Dalton asked. Grandma was in Willowgate. I said, she had a fall on the 10th. She was on bed rest. She couldn't leave the facility. I remember because I tried to visit her on the 12th and the nurses said she was too fatigued for visitors. Dalton's eyebrows shot up. You are sure I am positive? I said, I have the text messages to Chloe telling her I couldn't get in. Dalton leaned forward. A shark smelling blood in the water. If the document says it was signed at Cedar Brook Financial Center, but your grandmother was bedridden at Willowgate, then the notary lied. And if the notary lied about where the signing happened, the whole document is suspect. We need to confirm she was at Willowgate, he said. Can you get the facility logs? I can try. I said, I drove to Willowgate residence that afternoon. It was a nice facility, clean and bright, but it still held the distinct, antiseptic smell of managed decline. I went to the front desk. The administrator, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, knew me. She had always liked how often I visited. Madeline, she said warmly, it is good to see you. How are you holding up? I am okay. Mrs. Higgins, I said, I have a strange question. I'm trying to sort out some of Grandma's paperwork, and there is a confusion about a date. November 12th. Mrs. Higgins tapped on her keyboard. November 12th. Let's see. Ah, yes, that was a hard week for her. She was on level 2 care protocol because of the fall, so she couldn't leave the building, I asked. Heavens no. Mrs. Higgins said. She was barely leaving her bed. We were bringing her meals on a tray. I needed to be careful. I didn't want to alert anyone that I was building a legal case, but I needed something in writing. Is there any way I could get a printout of her care log for that week, I asked? Just for my records. The insurance company is being difficult about the dates of her decline. It was a small lie, but effective. Everyone hated insurance companies. Of course, Mrs. Higgins said. She printed a page and handed it to me. I looked at it. November 12th. Patient confined to bed. Vitals taken at 0900, 1200, 1500, 1800. There it was. Proof. She was in that bed all day. She never went to Cedar Brook Financial Center. As I was folding the paper, Mrs. Higgins hesitated. You know, she said, lowering her voice. We were worried about her that week. Worried how I asked. Your parents, she said. They were here a lot, which is usually good, of course. But they were intense. They asked us to leave the room multiple times. They put a do not disturb sign on the door. She looked around to make sure no one was listening. One of the nurses, Brenda, she told me that your father insisted she not come in to check vitals for an hour. He said they were handling sensitive family paperwork and didn't want to be interrupted. We usually don't allow that, but your father will. He can be very persuasive. He bullied you. I said, Mrs. Higgins offered a tight, sympathetic smile. He was very firm. We documented it. Of course, we noted that the family refused entry to staff at 1400 hours. Can I have that note too, I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. I suppose, since you are the executor, or well, since you are family. She printed the second page. I walked out of Willowgate with the smoking gun in my purse. My parents had brought the papers to her. They had forced her to sign while she was weak, and then, somehow, they had gotten a notary at a bank across town to stamp it, claiming she was there. That was fraud. That was a felony. I was getting into my car when my phone rang. It was Chloe. I stared at the screen. We hadn't spoken since the coffee shop. I answered, What do you want? Chloe. You are ruining everything, she screamed. Her voice was hysterical, high and jagged. Hello to you too. I said, Dad is freaking out. Madeline. She was crying now. He got another letter from your lawyer. About the notary. Why are you asking about the notary? Because they broke the law. Chloe. I said calmly. They forged the location of the signing. Grandma was in bed. She didn't go to the bank. Who cares where she was? Chloe shrieked. She signed it. It is her signature. Why do you have to pick apart every little detail? You are going to get Dad in trouble. He got himself in trouble. I said, You don't understand, she yelled. If that trust gets challenged, if they freeze the accounts, it all comes out. Madeline. Everything I froze. My hand gripped the steering wheel. What comes out? Chloe. I asked. She went silent. I could hear her breathing, jagged and wet. What comes out, I repeated. I can't, she whispered. Just stop it. Madeline, please, if you love us at all, just take the money they offered and stop. They haven't offered me any money. I said, They offered me a loan. She hung up. It all comes out. It wasn't just about the inheritance. It wasn't just about the boutique. There was something else, something bigger. I went home and opened my laptop. I had the name Harbor Slate Recovery. I had the connection to Dad's thing. I started searching for my father's old company, Henderson Allied Supply. He had sold it 5 years ago, abruptly, claiming he wanted to retire and focus on his golf game, at the time. It had seemed like a victory lap. I dug into the public records of the sale. It wasn't a standard acquisition, it was an asset liquidation. The buyer, a larger conglomerate, had bought the client list and the inventory, but not the entity itself. I searched for lawsuits involving Henderson Allied Supply. I found 3. 2 were standard vendor disputes, but the third one caught my eye. Plaintiff State Department of Labor versus Henderson Allied Supply. Case status settled. A settlement with the Department of Labor. That was unusual for a supply company. I needed someone on the inside. I thought about who my father used to work with. There was Mr. Abernathy. He had been the comptroller at Allied for 20 years. A quiet man, always wore a bow tie. He had retired around the same time Dad sold the company. I found his number in the white pages. People like Mr. Abernathy still had landlines. I called him. Mr. Abernathy. This is Madeline Henderson, Robert's daughter. Madeline, he wheezed. His voice sounded old. My goodness. I haven't seen you since you were in braces. How is your father? He is... Well, I lied. Actually, Mr. Abernathy, I am calling about the business. I am helping Dad sort through some old paperwork from the sale, and I came across a file for Harbor Slate Recovery. I was wondering if you recalled that name? The line went quiet. The friendly nostalgia evaporated instantly. I don't think we should discuss that. Madeline. He said, Please, Mr. Abernathy. I said, I am trying to help him. I think there might be an issue with the trust, and I need to know what that debt was for. If I don't know, I can't protect him. It was a manipulation, but a necessary one. Mr. Abernathy sighed. It was a long, rattling sound. That wasn't a business debt. Madeline, he said, not legally. What was it? It was the pension fund, he whispered. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. The pension fund. Your father. He got into some trouble. The market took a dip, and he had leveraged himself too high on a property deal. He borrowed from the employee retirement pool. He meant to put it back. They always mean to put it back. Oh my God. I breathed. But he couldn't. Mr. Abernathy continued. The regulators were coming for an audit. He had to plug the hole. He went to a hard money lender, Harbor Slate. They are not a bank. Madeline, they are sharks. He borrowed at an exorbitant rate to fill the pension fund before the auditors arrived. He saved the company, but he took on a personal debt that was eating him alive. So the settlement with the Department of Labor, that was for a paperwork error. Mr. Abernathy said, a slap on the wrist. They never found out about the missing funds because he put it back in time, but the debt to Harbor Slate remained. It followed him, and he has been paying it ever since I asked. I assume so, he said. If he stopped paying, they would expose him. And if that came out, well, he would lose everything, his reputation, his standing. He could go to prison. Madeline, even now. I thanked him and hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment, the pieces finally locking together into a horrifying picture. My father wasn't just a controlling patriarch, he was a man with a gun to his head. He had embezzled from his employees. He had covered it up with a loan from a predatory lender, and for 5 years. He had been bleeding the family dry to pay the interest. When Grandma died, he saw a way out, the inheritance. It wasn't about Chloe's boutique. That was just the cover story to keep Chloe quiet and compliant. The $75,000 and likely more from the estate was the lump sum he needed to finally pay off Harbor Slate, or at least keep them at bay for another year. The conditional support clause, the gaslighting, the pressure on Grandma. It was all desperation. He was terrified. If I challenged the trust, the forensic accountants would look at the flows. They would see the payments to Harbor Slate. They would ask what they were for, and the whole house of cards would collapse. If that trust gets challenged, it all comes out. Chloe knew. She might not know the details of the pension fund, but she knew the money was saving Dad from ruin. I walked to the window. The city lights blurred through the rain. I had started this wanting $75,000 and an apology. Now, I held the power to send my father to prison and destroy the family name he cherished above all else. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mr. Dalton. We have enough for a petition to remove them as trustees. Do you want to file? I looked at the text. I thought about the conditional support clause. Financial instability. Poor judgment. I thought about my grandmother, frightened and tired in her bed, bullied into signing away her wishes. I typed back, file it, Mr. Dalton sat across from me in his office, his fingers tented over the file I had brought him. Outside, the sky over Lake Haven was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that hadn't quite broken. It matched the pressure building inside my chest. "We have a choice here, Madeline," he said. He spoke with the measured cadence of a man who had seen hundreds of families tear themselves apart over much less than this. "We can file the petition for removal of trustees immediately. That is the nuclear option. It puts everything on the public record, the fraud, the notary issues, the conditional support clause. And if we do that," I asked, "then your parents will be forced to defend themselves in open court," he said, "if your suspicions about the pension fund and the debt collectors are true. That exposure could destroy your father, not just financially, but criminally." I looked down at my hands. I thought about my father's pride. It was a physical thing, a wall he had built brick by brick over 60 years. Destroying it felt like a violence, even if he had built it on lies. "What is the other option?" I asked. "The strategic squeeze," Dalton said. "We proceed with a targeted legal demand. We challenge the validity of the trust amendment based on the notary discrepancy. We demand the full accounting again, but this time, we attach the evidence from Willowgate. We show them we know they lied about the signing location, and then we wait." He said, "If there is misconduct, and we know there is, they will panic. They will try to make this go away quietly before a judge sees it. They will offer a settlement. They will try to buy your silence. And if they don't, then they expose themselves fighting it," he said. "Every document they produce to defend the lie will likely contradict another lie. They are trapped in a web of their own making. We just have to tug on the threads until they trip." I nodded. "Let's tug," I said. 3 days after Dalton sent the targeted demand letter, attaching the proof that Grandma was in bed at Willowgate on the day she supposedly signed the papers at the bank, my phone buzzed. It was my mother, Madeline. "Please come over on Sunday afternoon. We want to have a family meeting, just to clear the air. We want to find a way forward." I stared at the screen. Clear the air. It was her favorite phrase. It usually meant pretend nothing happened while we force you to agree with us. Then a second text arrived. "Mrs. Albright will be joining us. She has been such a spiritual support to the family, and we thought having a neutral party might help us communicate better." I let out a short, bitter laugh. Mrs. Albright. She was the head of the church charity committee. A woman who wore floral print dresses and wielded passive aggression like a scalpel. She wasn't a neutral witness. She was an audience. She was there to ensure that I behaved. Because my parents knew I would never make a scene in front of a pillar of the community. It was a trap. It was stage setting. I forwarded the message to Dalton. "Go," he replied. "Listen, agree to nothing. Take notes." I arrived at my parents' house at 2 o'clock on Sunday. The driveway was freshly swept. The hydrangeas were in full bloom. It looked like a postcard of suburban tranquility. When I walked in, the scene was set. My father was sitting in his leather armchair, looking weary but dignified. My mother was fluttering around the coffee table, which was set with her good silver tea service and a plate of bakery cookies. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, her legs tucked under her, looking small and tragic, and there, in the wingback chair, sat Mrs. Albright. "Madeline, dear," Mrs. Albright cooed, extending a soft, powdery hand. "It is so good to see you. Your mother tells me you have been going through such a difficult time." I took her hand. It felt like holding a bag of dead leaves. "Hello, Mrs. Albright," I said. "I didn't know you were part of the estate discussions." "Oh, I am not here for business," she said, clutching her pearls. "I am just here to pray for peace. Your parents are so worried about you. Dear, they just want the family to be whole again." I sat in the stiff wooden chair they had positioned opposite the sofa. I was the defendant. They were the tribunal. "Madeline," my father started. His voice was low, modulated for Mrs. Albright's benefit. "We received the letter from your attorney." I waited. I kept my face blank. "I must say, I am deeply hurt," he continued. "To accuse your own parents of fraud, to harass the nursing home staff for records, it is beneath you. I didn't harass anyone." Dad, I said calmly, I asked for the truth. The truth is that we are trying to protect you, my mother burst out, then caught herself as Mrs. Albright patted her arm. We want to end this, my father said, cutting through the emotion. We do not want a legal battle. It would be a waste of the estate's resources, and it would be an embarrassment to your grandmother's memory. He reached under the coffee table and pulled out a manila envelope. We have discussed it, he said, and even though the trust terms are clear about the conditional support, we want to help you. We know you are struggling. We know the divorce left you fragile. I stiffened. I am not fragile. He ignored me. We are willing to authorize a loan from the family trust. $20,000. It will be interest-free. You can use it to get back on your feet. 20,000, I repeated. The inheritance was 75,000. That money is gone. Madeline, my father said sharply, it was absorbed into the trust. This is a new offer, 20,000, to help you. He slid a document across the table. There is just one condition, he said. Since this is a departure from the trust's strict terms, we need to document it properly. This is a waiver. It just says that you accept this amount and that you agree not to pursue any further legal action against the estate or the trustees. Just a formality, my mother added, pouring tea with a trembling hand. So we can all move on. Mrs. Albright beamed at me. Isn't that generous? Madeline. Your parents are so forgiving. I looked at the paper, settlement agreement and general release. I looked at my father. He was watching me with an intensity that bordered on desperation. He was smiling, a tight, grimacing smile that didn't reach his eyes, but what caught my attention were his hands. He was resting them on his knees, but his fingers were drumming a frantic rhythm. When he reached for his coffee cup, the china rattled against the saucer. He was terrified. He needed me to sign this. He needed it so badly that he was sweating, despite the air conditioning. I reached out and took the paper. I will need to read this. I said, just sign it now. Dear, my mother said, her voice rising in pitch. We can just be done with it. Mrs. Albright can witness it. I'm not signing anything without reading it. Mom, I said. I stood up. My father's smile vanished. His face darkened, the old anger flashing behind the mask. Don't be difficult. Madeline, he warned, we are offering you a lifeline. If you walk out that door with that paper, the offer is off. I looked him in the eye. Then I guess I will take my chances. I said, I walked out. I heard Mrs. Albright gasp, and my mother start to sob. But I didn't stop. I walked to my car, the paper burning a hole in my hand. I was at Dalton's office at 8 o'clock the next morning. He read the waiver in silence. He read it once, then went back to the beginning and read it again. When he looked up, his expression was grim. You were right not to sign this, he said. What does it say? I asked. It is not just a waiver for the trust, he said. Look here, paragraph 4. He pointed to a block of dense text. The beneficiary hereby releases the trustees, the estate, Wexler Crane Fiduciary Services, and any related parties, entities, or assignees from any and all liability, claims, or causes of action, known or unknown, past or present. Do you see the trap? Dalton asked. Related parties. I read, exactly, Dalton said, and look at the definition of claims. It includes claims of mismanagement, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud. He took off his glasses. Madeline, if you signed this, you wouldn't just be settling the inheritance dispute. You would be releasing them from liability for everything. If we prove tomorrow that your father stole $1 million from the pension fund and laundered it through the estate, this document would protect him. You would be signing away your right to ever hold him accountable for the theft. They tried to trick me, I whispered. They tried to bury the body, Dalton corrected. This isn't a settlement. It is a hush money agreement. And the fact that they offered you $20,000 when they claim the estate is tight tells me they are desperate to get your signature before we dig any deeper. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. They had sat there, with their pastor's wife and their tea and cookies, and tried to trick me into becoming an accessory to their crime. What do we do? I asked. We don't sign, Dalton said. And we don't counteroffer. We let the deadline on this offer expire. Let them sweat. In the meantime, I want you to go back through everything you found in that safe deposit box. If they are this scared, there is something else. There is a specific smoking gun they are afraid you will find. I went home and pulled the box out of my closet again. I spread everything on the floor. The ledger, the will, the check to Harbor Slate. I had looked at the financial documents a dozen times. But I hadn't paid as much attention to the personal papers. There was a stack of greeting cards my grandmother had saved. I flipped through them. Happy birthday. Mom, get well soon. Grandma. Stuck between two Christmas cards was a piece of lined notebook paper. It wasn't a letter I had sent. It was a draft of a letter she had written. The handwriting was shaky. The ink smudged in places as if she had been crying or her hand had been sweating. Dear Mr. Henderson. I frowned. Mr. Henderson, that was my father. Why would she write a formal letter to her son? I read on. Dear Mr. Wexler. It was addressed to the attorney. I am writing to you because I'm confused about the new papers Robert keeps bringing me. He tells me I need to change the trust to protect Madeline, but the words are hard to understand. He gets very angry when I ask questions. He told me yesterday that if I don't sign, the government will take the house. I don't want to change my will. I want Madeline to have the money I set aside. She is the only one who doesn't ask me for anything. Please do not change the papers without talking to me alone. I am afraid he's going to make me sign something when I'm too tired to read it. I just want peace. The letter ended there. It was unsigned. It was never sent. She had written it, folded it, and then, hidden it, forgotten it. Or maybe my father had walked in before she could finish it. And she had shoved it into the stack of cards to hide it from him. I held the paper to my chest. I am afraid he is going to make me sign something. It was the voice of a woman who was being held hostage in her own life. I took a picture of the letter and sent it to Sarah. I found this. I typed. She knew. She was trying to stop them. Sarah called me 5 minutes later. Madeline, this is heartbreaking, she said. Her voice was thick with emotion. But it is also leverage. I know. I said, but I am so tired of the leverage. Sarah. I just want them to admit it. They won't, Sarah said. Not your dad. He is too deep in the lie. He believes his own spin. What about Mom? She follows him. Sarah said, she is the enabler. She will sink with the ship. Then who? I asked. Chloe. Sarah said, Chloe. She is the weak link. Madeline. Think about it. She is the one who benefits, but she is also the one who doesn't know the whole story. She thinks this is just about family loyalty and her boutique. She doesn't know about the pension fraud. She doesn't know about the unstable clause. She doesn't know about this letter. She knows about the $75,000. I said, she knows what they told her. Sarah countered. They probably told her you were being greedy and that the money was needed to save the family from some vague tax issue. If she knew the reality that she is being used as a human shield to cover up embezzlement, she might crack. I don't know. I said, she stormed out last time. Because you attacked her. Sarah said, you need to talk to her. Really talk to her. Alone. Without your parents hovering. Don't yell. Don't accuse. Just show her the truth. I thought about it. Chloe was spoiled. She was selfish. But she wasn't malicious. She was a child who had never been forced to grow up because my parents needed her to be dependent. I texted Chloe, I am not going to sue you. I am not going to scream. I just want to show you one thing. Please meet me at the Riverwalk Park. 10 minutes. If you want to leave after that, you can. She didn't reply for an hour. Then fine. Tomorrow at noon. The Riverwalk was neutral territory. It was open, public, and loud with the sound of the rushing water. I sat on a bench near the fountain. Chloe arrived wearing dark sunglasses and a defensive posture. She didn't sit down. Make it quick. She said, Mom says I shouldn't be talking to you. She says you are building a case. I am, I said, but not against you. I patted the space next to me. Please, just for a minute. She hesitated, then sat down on the far edge of the bench, putting as much distance between us as possible. I am not here to fight about the boutique, I said quietly. You can have the boutique. I hope it succeeds. Then what do you want? She asked. I want you to know what you are defending. I said. I opened my folder. I didn't take out the ledger or the will. I took out the copy of the conditional support clause. Read this. I said. She looked at it. She read the words, financial instability and destructive behaviors. She frowned. What is this? She asked. That is the reason Dad gave the lawyers for taking my inheritance. I said, he didn't say it was for your business. He said I was mentally unstable and couldn't be trusted with money. Chloe looked up at me. Her sunglasses slid down her nose. He said that it is in the trust. Chloe. He signed it. Mom signed it. I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. And then there is this, I said. I handed her the copy of the unsent letter from Grandma. I am afraid he is going to make me sign something. Chloe read it. I watched her eyes move back and forth across the shaky handwriting. I saw her throat work as she swallowed. She didn't send this. Chloe whispered, No, I said. She hid it, because she was scared of Dad. Chloe handed the paper back to me. Her hand was trembling. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Her voice was thin. Because I don't think you know the whole story. I said, I think they told you that taking my money was necessary to help you. But it wasn't just for you. Chloe, she looked away, staring at the river. They told me. She started, then stopped. What did they tell you? I asked gently. They told me it was a clean slate, she said softly. Her voice broke. Dad sat me down. He was crying. I have never seen him cry. He said he had made mistakes. He said the old business, there were debts. The pension fund, I asked. She looked at me, startled. You know I know about the debt collectors. I said, Harbor Slate. Chloe nodded. Tears were leaking from under her sunglasses now. He said if he didn't pay them, he would lose the house. He said he couldn't survive another hit. He said the inheritance was the only cash they could access quickly without raising flags. She turned to me, her face crumbling. He promised me. Madeline. He promised that if I went along with it, if I let them say the money was for my shop, that he would make it right eventually. He said he just needed a cover story. He said using my boutique as the reason would look better than the truth. I felt a wave of nausea. They had used her. They had weaponized her dreams and her dependency to cover up his crime. They had made her the face of the theft so that if anyone asked, it looked like a family dispute over a spoiled daughter, not a frantic cover-up of embezzlement. He made you the shield. I said, I didn't want to hurt you. Chloe sobbed. I didn't want him to go to jail. He said he might go to jail. He might. I said. Chloe grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. You can't. Madeline, you can't expose him. It will kill him. It will kill Mom. Please, just take the $20,000. I will pay you the rest back. I swear. I will work. I will pay you every cent. I looked at my sister. For the first time in years, I didn't see the golden child. I saw a victim. She was trapped in the same web I was. But she was wrapped tighter. She believed she was saving the family. But she was just helping them dig the grave deeper. I can't take the $20,000. Chloe, I said. Why not? Because the paper they want me to sign to get it, it releases them from everything. It buries the crime forever, and it makes me a liar. I stood up. I don't want to destroy you. Chloe, I said, I really don't. But I can't let them do this. Grandma was scared of them. I am not going to be scared of them. What are you going to do? She whispered. I am going to finish it, I said. I walked away. I didn't look back, but I could hear her crying on the bench, a lonely, jagged sound over the rush of the water. I drove straight to Dalton's office. I sat down in the chair I had come to know so well. You were right, I said. Chloe talked, and Dalton asked. She confirmed it. Dad told her the money was to pay off old business debts. He told her he might go to jail. He used the boutique as a cover story to hide the insolvency. Dalton nodded slowly. He didn't look triumphant. He looked solemn. That is the final piece, he said. We have the motive. We have the method. We have the witness. So what is the next step, I asked. Do we sue? Dalton leaned forward. We could sue, he said, but lawsuits take years, and they are messy. I think we have enough now to end this in one room. One room we call a final meeting, he said. We bring everything, the Willowgate logs, the Harbor Slate check, the unsent letter, and the draft of the complaint we are ready to file with the Attorney General and the State Fraud Division. We show them the cliff, I said. We show them the cliff, Dalton agreed, and we give them one chance to step back before we push them off. I thought about my father's shaking hands. I thought about my mother's desperate tea party. I thought about Chloe sobbing on the bench. It was going to be brutal. It was going to shatter the illusion of the respectable Henderson family forever. But the illusion was already dead. It had died the moment my father decided his reputation was worth more than his mother's dignity and his daughter's trust. Set it up, I said. The demand letter Elias Dalton filed was not a request. It was a siege weapon. We did not ask for clarification or discussion. We demanded the complete notary logbook for the date of November 12th. We demanded every email, memo, and internal note exchanged between my parents and Wexler Crane regarding the amendment of the Henderson Family Trust. We demanded the bank records showing the flow of funds from the moment of my grandmother's death to the present day. We gave them 5 business days. The response from Wexler Crane arrived in 48 hours. It was not the capitulation I had hoped for. It was a shield wall. The letter was signed by a senior partner I had never heard of, a man named Sterling. His tone was dripping with condescension. He characterized my demands as harassment, baseless conjecture, and an abuse of the discovery process. He claimed that the notary records were privileged, which Dalton assured me was a lie, and implied that if I did not withdraw my inflammatory accusations within 3 days, the estate would seek legal fees against me for frivolous litigation. They are trying to scare you, Dalton said, tossing the letter onto his desk. They want you to think you are the one in danger. It is the oldest trick in the book. If you have the facts, you argue the facts. If you have the law, you argue the law. If you have neither, you pound the table and yell. They are pounding the table, I said. Hard, Dalton agreed, which means they know the facts and the law are about to destroy them. But while the lawyers fought on paper, my parents opened a second front. They took the war to the living rooms of Briar Glen. It started with a call from my Aunt Linda. Linda was my father's younger sister, a woman who lived in Florida and consumed family gossip like oxygen. Madeline, she said, her voice tight with performative concern. I just got off the phone with your mother. I am so worried about you. I am fine. Aunt Linda, I said, bracing myself. Are you? She asked. Ellen says you are having episodes. She says the divorce was harder on you than you let on. She says you are lashing out at them because you are hurting. I gripped the phone. They were using the conditional support clause. They were seeding the narrative that I was unstable, just as the trust document claimed. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. Create a legal document saying your daughter is crazy, then use her reaction to the theft as proof of her craziness. I am not having episodes. I said, I am asking for an accounting of Grandma's estate. Oh, honey, Linda sighed. It is just money. Your father has supported that family for 40 years. To accuse him of stealing, it sounds like you are not yourself. Your mother said you screamed at Chloe in a public park. I didn't scream. I said, she says you are trying to punish them. Linda continued, steamrolling over me. She says you are punishing the family because you are unhappy with your own life. Just get some help, Madeline, before you lose everyone. She hung up. The calls kept coming. My cousin Mike, my grandmother's neighbor. Even the pastor of the church I hadn't attended in 10 years sent a prayerful note encouraging me to find forgiveness and release the spirit of greed. It hurt. It hurt in a way that physical pain never could. I was being rewritten. My history of reliability, of showing up, of being the one who handled the logistics and the crises, it was all being erased and replaced with a caricature of a bitter, greedy divorcee. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the evidence on Facebook. I wanted to burn the town down with the truth. but I remembered Dalton's advice. We don't fight in the mud. We fight in the deposition room. I focused on the work. I needed to dismantle their support network. I kept thinking about Mrs. Albright, the neutral witness at the tea party, the woman who had sat there clutching her pearls while my parents tried to trick me into signing away my rights. Something about her presence bothered me. My mother had called her a spiritual support, but Mrs. Albright wasn't particularly religious. She was practical. She was the treasurer of the Charity League, not the chaplain. I went online. I searched for Albright Bookkeeping Briar Glen. Nothing came up under her name. I tried a broader search. I looked up her husband, who had passed away 5 years ago. I looked up her address. Then I found it. A LinkedIn profile for a Janice Albright, listing her current employment as part-time reconciliation specialist at Miller Associates. Miller Associates. The name sounded familiar. I went back to the public records I had pulled on my father's old company, Henderson Allied Supply. I looked at the bankruptcy filings and the sale documents. The accounting firm listed for Henderson Allied Supply was Miller Associates. I sat back in my chair, the realization settling over me like a cold fog. Mrs. Albright wasn't a church friend. She was an employee of the firm that had managed my father's books during the years he was embezzling from the pension fund. She knew. She wasn't there to witness my signature for spiritual reasons. She was there because she was part of the cleanup crew. She was likely the one who had helped him structure the payouts to Harbor Slate to look like business expenses. I called Dalton. The neutral witness is a plant, I said. Mrs. Albright works for the accounting firm that handled Dad's company. She knows about the pension fund. Dalton let out a low whistle. That is conflict of interest, coercion, and conspiracy all wrapped in a floral dress. Good catch. Madeline, we are going to add her to the deposition list. You can depose her if she was present during settlement negotiations. She is a witness. Dalton said, and if she has professional ties to the adverse party that were not disclosed, her credibility is shot. We are going to squeeze her. 2 days later, Dalton called me with the smoking gun. We got the bank records, he said, and you were right. He emailed me a PDF. I opened it. It was a transaction history for the Henderson Family Revocable Trust. My eyes scanned the lines. December 2nd, death of Margaret E. Henderson. December 4th, transfer from Juniper Ridge Savings Estate to Trust, $180,000. December 5th, wire transfer out. The amount was $50,000. The recipient was HSR Holdings LLC, Harbor Slate Recovery. They hadn't even waited for the funeral. My grandmother's body was still at the funeral home, and my father was already wiring her life savings to a debt collector to save his own skin. I stared at the date. December 5th. That was the day I had gone to the florist to pick out the spray for the casket. I remembered my father calling me, asking if I could handle the payment for the flowers because he had left his wallet at home. He didn't have his wallet. He was too busy wiring $50,000 to a shark. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a surge of pure, crystalline anger. It is over, I said into the phone. We have them. Not yet, Dalton said. Now we have the leverage to make them talk. I am scheduling the depositions for next Tuesday. Your father, your mother, and Mrs. Albright. The reaction was immediate. Wexler Crane contacted Dalton 4 hours after the deposition notices were served. They wanted a conference. They don't want to depose. Dalton told me, they know that if your father sits in that chair under oath, he either has to commit perjury, which is a felony, or admit to the embezzlement, which is also a felony. They are looking for an exit ramp. The offer came the next morning. It was no longer $20,000. Settlement offer $100,000. Immediate payment. It was more than the original inheritance. It was enough to pay off my debts, fix my car, and put a down payment on a small house. It was a go-away number, but the strings attached were made of steel. Condition claimant agrees to a full non-disclosure agreement regarding all matters of the estate and the Henderson Family Trust. Claimant agrees to seal all discovery documents. Claimant agrees to issue a statement retracting prior allegations of mismanagement. They wanted me to take the money and lie. They wanted me to tell the world to tell Aunt Linda and the cousin and the pastor that I had been wrong, that I had been confused, that my parents were the heroes and I was the repentant daughter who had come to her senses. Dalton presented the offer to me in his office. "It is a lot of money, Madeline," he said quietly. "I have to advise you that this is a successful outcome financially. You get more than you were owed." I looked at the paper. $100,000. It would make everything easy. I could disappear. I could move to a new town. I could stop the whisper campaign. I could stop the phone calls from crying relatives. I could just be done. "Take the night," Dalton said. "Sleep on it." I went home. I sat in my apartment. The silence was heavy. I imagined my life if I signed. I saw myself buying a house. I saw myself driving a reliable car. But then I saw the family dinners I would never be invited to again. I saw my father's smug face at the country club, knowing he had bought his way out of a crime. I saw Chloe, still trapped in the web, believing that money fixes everything. And I saw my grandmother. I saw her in the nursing home bed, tired and scared, being bullied by the son she loved. If I took the money, I was selling her out. I was selling the truth of her final days for $100,000. I was agreeing that her dignity had a price tag. I opened the shoebox one last time. I took out the note. Trust paper over promises. And the other line, from her unsent letter, "I just want peace." Peace wasn't silence. Silence was what my parents wanted. Silence was the cover for the rot. Peace was truth. Peace was cleaning the wound so it could actually heal. Quiet bought by silence is still a cage. I didn't sleep. I watched the sun come up over the city, turning the gray sky to gold. At 8 o'clock, I called Dalton. "No." I said. "Are you sure?" Dalton asked. "I don't want their hush money." I said, "I want the estate fixed." "What are the terms?" "I want a full correction of the distribution." I said, "I want the money returned to the estate. I want a clean accounting filed with the court. And I want them removed. Removed, I want Robert and Ellen Henderson removed as trustees." I said, "I want an independent administrator appointed to manage whatever is left. I want them to have zero control over my grandmother's legacy. That is a declaration of war." Dalton said, "They will never agree to that voluntarily. It means admitting they are unfit. Then we fight," I said, "and tell them the price just went up. The price is their control." Dalton relayed the demand. The response from Wexler Crane was swift and hostile. The trustees reject the demand in its entirety. The settlement offer is withdrawn. We will vigorously defend the reputation of the trustees and will seek maximum sanctions against your client for this malicious prosecution. They were doubling down. They were betting I wouldn't push the button. That afternoon, I came home from work to find a plain manila envelope in my mailbox. There was no stamp, no return address. It had been hand-delivered. My heart hammered against my ribs. I carried it upstairs, checking the hallway for shadows. I opened it on my kitchen counter. Inside were 3 sheets of paper. They were printouts of emails. The header showed the sender, Robert Henderson. The recipient, Admin Harbor, Slate.com. The subject, payment schedule, The date was 6 months ago. I understand the urgency. I am liquidating family assets to cover the shortfall. Please hold off on the notification to the regulators. If this becomes public, I cannot pay you anything. I need another month to move the funds. The reply from Harbor Slate was short and brutal. You have until December 15th. After that, we file the lien and the notification of default. This will trigger the audit you are trying to avoid. And then, a third email. This one dated December 3rd. The day after Grandma died. Funds secured. Wire initiating this week. Please confirm this closes the file and keeps the previous matter from becoming discoverable. I stared at the papers. Funds secured. He was talking about Grandma's death as if it were a liquidity event. He was celebrating the securing of the funds before she was even in the ground. I looked at the envelope again. Who sent this? It wasn't Chloe. She didn't have access to his email. Mrs. Albright. Maybe she grew a conscience, unlikely. Then I thought about the previous matter mentioned in the email, the pension fund. Mr. Abernathy, the old comptroller, the man who had told me about the embezzlement, he had access. He knew where the bodies were buried. Maybe he had been holding on to these just in case my father tried to pin the blame on him. It didn't matter who sent it. It mattered what it was. This wasn't just proof of a debt. It was proof of motive for the theft. It was proof that the conditional support clause and the rushed signing were part of a premeditated scheme to defraud the estate to pay off a blackmailer. I took a picture of the emails and sent them to Dalton. "We have the nuke," I typed. Dalton called me immediately. "Do not lose those papers. Put them in a safe. This is criminal intent." I was putting the papers into my own small fireproof box when the buzzer to my apartment rang. I jumped. I walked to the intercom. "Who is it?" "It's me," a voice said. It was my father. I froze. He had never been to my apartment. He had always refused to visit, saying the neighborhood was transitional. "Madeline." "Please," he said. His voice was muffled by the static. "I just want to talk. No lawyers. Just father and daughter." I debated leaving him there, but I needed to see him. I needed to see the man who had written those emails. I buzzed him in. I opened my door and stood in the frame. I didn't invite him in. He looked terrible. His skin was gray. His eyes rimmed with red. He was wearing a golf jacket that looked too big for him, as if he had shrunk in the last week. "May I come in?" he asked. "No," I said. "You can say what you need to say from the hall." He flinched. He looked around the hallway, nervous that a neighbor might hear. "Madeline, this has gone too far," he said. His voice was trembling. "We are tearing this family apart. You tore it apart. Dad," I said, "I am just looking at the pieces." "Please," he said. He reached out a hand, then dropped it when I didn't move. "You have to stop this. You don't understand what you're doing. If you pursue this removal petition, if you depose Mrs. Albright, it is going to ruin us. Ruin you how I asked. Everything," he whispered. "The reputation, the standing. People will talk. People are already talking." "Dad," I said, "you made sure of that. Aunt Linda called me a greedy monster yesterday. I can fix that," he said quickly. "I can tell them we worked it out. I can tell them you were right. I will give you the money. I will give you more. Just don't make me go on the record." I looked at him. For a second, I saw the father I used to adore, the strong man who fixed things, the man who taught me how to ride a bike. But then I saw the date on the email. Funds secured. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't apologizing for stealing from his mother or gaslighting his daughter. He was apologizing because he was cornered. He was pleading with me to save him from the consequences of his own actions, just like he had used Grandma's money to save him from the consequences of the pension fraud. It was fear, pure, distilled fear. "You are scared," I said softly. He looked at me, his eyes wide and wet. "I am terrified. Madeline," he choked out, "if this gets out, I am an old man. I can't go to jail." The admission hung in the air. He had finally said it. I felt a strange release. The anger drained away, leaving only a profound sadness. "I don't want you to go to jail." "Dad," I said. "Then stop." He begged. "Sign the agreement." "I can't do that," I said. His face crumbled. "Then what?" "What do you want?" "I want you to admit it," I said. "Not here, not in the hallway. I want you to admit it to the estate." I stepped back. "We have a meeting scheduled for Friday," I said. "Bring your lawyer. Bring Mom. Bring Chloe. Madeline. If you want to save yourself from jail, Dad, you will do exactly what I say on Friday. And the first thing you will do is stop lying." I closed the door. I leaned against the wood, listening to his heavy, shuffling footsteps retreat down the hall. I slid the deadbolt into place. I walked back to the kitchen and looked at the stack of evidence, the ledger, the check, the letter, the emails. I was done being the dutiful daughter. I was done being the reliable one who cleaned up the mess. Friday wasn't going to be a negotiation. It was going to be a reckoning. The conference room at Dalton Reyes was smaller than the one at Wexler Crane, but it felt cleaner. There were no marble busts of founding partners, no oil paintings of ships negotiating stormy seas. There was just a long table of polished oak, 6 chairs, and a window overlooking the gray, choppy water of the lake. I arrived 15 minutes early. I sat in the chair facing the door. I placed my hands on the table, palms flat, feeling the cool grain of the wood. I checked my pulse. It was steady. For 33 years, my pulse had raced whenever I sensed my father's disapproval. I had spent my life calibrating my behavior to avoid the sudden spikes in his temper or the cold withdrawal of his affection. I had been the thermostat of the Henderson family, constantly adjusting to keep the temperature bearable, but today, I wasn't the thermostat. I was the weather. Mister? Dalton entered a moment later. He carried a thick accordion file. He looked at me, assessing my state. You ready? He asked. I am. I said. Remember, he said, setting the file down. Less is more. Let the documents do the screaming. You don't have to raise your voice. I touched the thin manila folder in front of me. It contained only 3 sheets of paper. I don't plan to scream. I said. They arrived at 10 o'clock exactly. My father led the way. Of course, he was wearing his best navy suit, the one he wore to board meetings and weddings. It was armor, but inside the armor, the man looked hollowed out. His skin had a papery gray quality, and his eyes were darting around the room, checking the corners as if looking for hidden cameras. My mother followed him. She was dressed in black, as if she were still in deep mourning, though I knew she had been playing tennis at the club 2 days ago. She was clutching a tissue in her hand, the prop already prepared for the performance. Chloe came last. She looked like a ghost. She was wearing jeans and a sweater that was too big for her. She didn't look at me. She pulled out the chair furthest from mine and sat down, staring intently at the water pitcher in the center of the table. Their lawyer, Mr. Sterling, brought up the rear. He was a large man with a flushed face and an expensive watch. He bustled in, slamming his briefcase onto the table to assert dominance. Good morning, Sterling boomed. Let's make this quick. My clients have been through enough harassment. Mr. Dalton didn't blink. Please, sit down. My parents took the seats opposite us. My father looked at me. His eyes were hard, pleading, and angry all at once. Madeline, he started. Mr. Dalton held up a hand. We will let the attorney speak first. Mr. Henderson. Sterling cleared his throat. Look, Elias, we are all reasonable people here. My clients are willing to put this unpleasantness behind them. The offer of $100,000 stands, despite your client's aggressive behavior. But we need the NDA signed today. The family needs closure. He slid a document across the table. It was the settlement agreement. My mother let out a small, choked sob. We just want you back. Madeline, she whispered. We just want to be a family again. Why are you doing this? I looked at her. Her tears were real, I suppose, but they were tears of frustration, not remorse. She was crying because the script wasn't working. I didn't answer. I looked at Dalton. Dalton opened his accordion file. He didn't look at the settlement offer. He didn't even touch it. We are not here to settle, Dalton said calmly. We are here to present the facts as we have found them and to offer your clients one opportunity to avoid a criminal referral. Sterling laughed. A sharp, barking sound. Criminal referral. Come on, Elias. Don't be dramatic. This is a family trust dispute. Is it? Dalton asked. He pulled out a piece of paper. Let's review the timeline. Dalton said, on November 12th, a notarized amendment to the Henderson Family Trust was allegedly signed by Margaret Henderson at the Cedar Brook Financial Center. This amendment introduced the Conditional Support Clause, effectively disinheriting Madeline Henderson based on false claims of financial instability. He slid the copy of the amendment across the table. My father stiffened. That is a valid document, he snapped. She signed it. Dalton pulled out a second paper. This is the daily care log from Willowgate residence for November 12th, Dalton said. It shows that Margaret Henderson was confined to her bed on Level 2 protocol following a fall. She did not leave the facility. She was not at Cedar Brook Financial Center. Sterling frowned. He picked up the paper. There could be a clerical error on the date, he muttered. Dalton pulled out a third paper. And this, he continued, is the affidavit from Janice Miller, the notary. When we informed her that we had proof of location, she recanted. She admitted she notarized the document without the signatory present, as a favor to a longtime client. The room went deadly silent. My father's face turned a shade of white I had never seen before. He gripped the edge of the table. "That woman is a liar," he hissed. Dalton ignored him. He kept building the wall, brick by brick. "We also have the financials," Dalton said. On December 4th, 2 days after Margaret Henderson's death, $180,000 was transferred from her personal savings to the trust. On December 5th, $50,000 was wired from the trust to an entity called HSR Holdings. Dalton looked at my father. "Harbor Slate Recovery," Dalton said. "A debt acquisition firm." My mother stopped crying. She looked at my father. "Robert," she whispered. My father didn't look at her. He was staring at Dalton with pure hatred. That was a business investment. My father said. His voice was shaking. Dalton pulled out the emails. The ones I had received anonymously. "Funds secured. Wire initiating this week. Please confirm this closes the file and keeps the previous matter from becoming discoverable." Dalton read the email aloud. The words hung in the air like smoke. "This is not a business investment, Mr. Henderson," Dalton said. "This is evidence of a motive to defraud the estate to cover personal insolvency and, likely, prior embezzlement from your former company's pension fund." Sterling looked at the emails. He looked at my father. He closed his briefcase. "I think," Sterling said slowly, looking at his client with new eyes, "that I need a moment to confer with my clients in private." "No," my father said. He slammed his hand on the table. "No private conferences. We are done here." He stood up, glaring at me. "You ungrateful child!" He spat. The veneer of the respectable businessman finally cracked, revealing the frightened, angry man beneath. "I did everything for you. I paid for your college. I paid for your wedding. And this is how you repay me. By digging through my trash. By trying to send me to jail." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You are selfish. Madeline, you have always been selfish. You would burn this whole family down just to get your hands on a check." My mother was sobbing openly now. "Madeline, stop it. Please just stop." Chloe was staring at the table, her hands over her ears, rocking slightly. I sat there. I let his words wash over me. Selfish, ungrateful. They were just words. They were the rattle of a cage door that I had already walked out of. I didn't yell back. I didn't cry. I opened my folder. "Sit down." "Dad," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his shouting like a razor. He stopped. He looked at me, surprised by the authority in my tone. I said, "Sit down." I repeated, "I have one more paper for you." He hesitated, then sank back into his chair. He looked defeated. I slid the single document across the table. "This isn't a lawsuit," I said, "and it isn't a settlement." My father picked it up. My mother leaned in to read it. It was a photocopy of a handwritten document on yellow legal paper. It was dated 6 months before my grandmother died. It was signed by Margaret Henderson. And importantly, it was witnessed and stamped by a notary at the Juniper Ridge Credit Union, a different notary. A valid one. "What is this?" my father whispered. "It is a memorandum of intent," Dalton explained. "Your mother left it in her safe deposit box. She knew you were pressuring her, Robert. She knew you were trying to get her to change the trust. She didn't have the strength to fight you physically, but she had the foresight to protect the assets." "Read the last paragraph," I said. My father read it aloud. His voice was barely a whisper. "If any change is made to my estate plan after this date that reduces the share intended for my granddaughter Madeline, or if my son Robert attempts to act as sole trustee without independent oversight, I hereby direct that my entire residuary estate be immediately transferred to the Briar Glen Public Library Foundation. This directive supersedes all prior and subsequent revocable trust amendments unless written in my own hand." My mother gasped. "The library." "Everything," I said. The color drained from my mother's face. She did the math instantly. If the trust was invalid because of the fraud, the old will stood. But if the poison pill was triggered, which it was, by their actions, then the money didn't go to me. And it didn't go to them. It went to charity. All of it. I said, the house, the savings, the investments. If we go to court, Dad, this document gets filed. And if this document gets filed, you don't just lose control, you lose every single dime. I leaned forward. And the harbor slate payments. The court will claw those back. You will have to repay that $50,000 personally. And since you don't have it, the creditors will come for your house. My father dropped the paper. It fluttered to the table. He looked at me with absolute horror. He realized that his mother, the quiet woman he had bullied and ignored, had outsmarted him from the grave. She had known that his greed would be his undoing, so she had turned the money into a trap. You wouldn't, he whispered. You wouldn't let the money go to strangers. Try me, I said. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had called me selfish for 30 years. You called me greedy. Dad, you said I was doing this for a check. This proves I'm not. I am willing to burn the money to ash if it means stopping you. The room was silent. Even Sterling looked impressed. It was the ultimate checkmate. I had removed the financial incentive for them to fight, because fighting meant total annihilation. My mother grabbed my father's arm. Robert, fix this. We can't lose the money. We can't lose the house. My father looked at the table. He looked at his hands. The fight had gone out of him. The respectable family image was shattered. He was just an embezzler caught in a spotlight. What do you want? He asked. His voice was dead. I want structure. I said. I pulled out the draft agreement Dalton had prepared. 1. I said, you and Mom resign as trustees immediately. Effective today. My father nodded. A small, jerky motion. 2. I continued. We appoint an independent administrator. Someone from the court, not your friend Mrs. Albright, not anyone you know, a stranger. He nodded again. 3. I said, the administrator will settle the estate. They will pay the legitimate debts. They will distribute the $75,000 to me as Grandma intended, and whatever is left, if there is anything left after they investigate your loans, that can go to you and Mom. But I want a forensic accounting of every penny you took from her in the last 10 years, and that $50,000 to harbor slate that comes out of your share. My mother started to protest, but that will leave us with almost nothing. Then you better learn to budget. I said cold, just like you told me to do. And 4, I said. I looked at them. No contact. My mother's eyes went wide. Madeline. No, you can't mean that. We are your parents. I mean it. I said, I don't want emails. I don't want calls. I don't want Mrs. Albright dragging me to tea. I want you to leave me alone. If you need to speak to me, you call Mr. Dalton. But for how long, she asked, weeping, until I decide otherwise. I said, maybe forever. I stood up. Sign the resignation. I said. My father picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He signed. My mother signed, her tears spotting the paper. Sterling took the papers and handed them to Dalton. It is done, Sterling said quietly. We will arrange the transfer of files to the independent administrator. I picked up my folder. I turned to leave. Madeline. The voice was small. It was Chloe. I turned around. She was looking at me, her face streaked with tears. She looked very young. What happens to me? She asked. My parents were looking at her too. They had forgotten about her in their panic. The boutique, Chloe asked. The lease if the money is frozen, if Dad can't control it. I looked at my sister, the cog in the machine. The administrator will decide if the boutique is a valid investment for the trust. I said, but they won't. Chloe whispered, it's a startup. They will say it's too risky, probably. I said, then I lose everything. She said, I signed the lease. I ordered the stock. If I can't pay, then you will have to get a job. Chloe? I said. She flinched as if I had slapped her. I walked back to the table. I leaned down so I was eye level with her. You knew. Chloe, I said softly, you knew the money was mine. You knew Dad was in trouble. You let them use you as the excuse. You took the coat. You took the trips. You took the lie because it was comfortable. I didn't mean to, she stammered. I know. I said, that is the problem. You never mean to. You just let things happen to you. But now, you have to choose. Choose what? Choose whose life you are going to live. I said, theirs or yours. I stood up straight. The money isn't coming. Chloe, the safety net is gone. I turned to my parents one last time. They looked like statues, ruins of a fallen empire. My father opened his mouth. Madeline, he croaked. Don't, I said. I walked to the door. I opened it. The air in the hallway was cool. It smelled of floor wax and rain. I stepped out. Madeline, my mother cried out. One last desperate attempt to pull me back into the orbit. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I walked down the long corridor, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the tile. Click, click, click. It sounded like a clock ticking, or maybe it sounded like a heart beating. I reached the elevator and pressed the button. The doors slid open. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, cutting off the view of the law office, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 12 years old. I checked my phone. I had a notification from my bank. My paycheck had hit. It wasn't $75,000. It was barely enough to cover rent, but it was mine. I walked out of the building and into the rain. It was pouring now, a heavy, cleansing deluge that washed the gray dust of the city into the gutters. I didn't open my umbrella. I let the rain hit my face. I let it soak my hair. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and got in. I sat there for a moment, listening to the drum of the water on the roof. I was alone. I had no parents to call. I had no sister to have coffee with. I had no safety net. I put the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. I smiled. I put the car in gear and drove away, leaving the paper, the money, and the family that had tried to consume me in the rearview mirror. I didn't know where I was going next, but for the first time in my life, I was the one driving. Thank you so much for listening to Madeline's story. It is a heavy journey, realizing that the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. But sometimes, holding a single piece of paper, the truth is more powerful than a lifetime of manipulation. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to stand up to family to protect your own peace? Please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, accountability, and the quiet power of standing your ground. And let me know in the comments, did Madeline do the right thing by walking away? Or should she have taken the money? Until next time, trust the paper over the promises. Goodbye.